Hello there, we are your hosts Vivek and Pavitra from the Agile Coach podcast. In this podcast, we bring fresh perspectives to you through our interviews with thought leaders in Agile coaching, facilitation, business analysis, and product management roles. Enjoy.
All right. Hi, Neha. How are you doing today?
Hey Trisha, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy Monday. So you want to have kind of chatted a little bit. We think you're excellent, and so we wanted to bring you in front of a panel. So I'd love to introduce Vivek, who is our head of product, and Michelle, who is our engineering manager. And everybody else, this is Neha. We're going to get to know her a little bit more. Without further ado, Neha, we'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. And nice to meet you guys. I'm excited to learn more about this company, what this role entails, and go from there. I'm super excited to be interviewing here. But yeah, as far as me, as Trisha mentioned, my name is Neha. I've been a PM for over 4 years now. I started my journey in business analytics, and through that, I realized a passion for product management and was able to make a switch pretty fast, given the state of the company and the need that was there. I've had experience in health tech industry for the past 3 years. And in this industry specifically, I've helped teams scale their products and find a product market fit. That's where I truly thrive in. So, however, for the past 2 years, I've been at a company called Tree. In this company, I manage a team of engineers who are focused on delivering our core product. Our core product is helping users find their content market fit in specifically influencer marketing space. Since being here, I've been able to improve booking conversion by 35% by identifying core user pain points. I did this by user research as well as focus group formats where I learned where users were struggling. I also used Pendo and other analytics tools to collect data to see where users were bouncing off. I've also since being here contributed to 3 million in new ARR for the company, so annual recurring revenue. I can definitely dive deeper into that as we progress in the interview. My strongest suites, however, as the product manager, are stakeholder management, user empathy, and connecting user problems to the business goal, which has made me quite successful in all the roles that I've been in.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to kick this off to Vivek, who has a couple of questions around the product itself.
Yeah, thanks, Trisha. Neha, can you walk us through your current role? And I'd love to hear, you said you are managing and leading engineers. What's your interaction with your engineers on a week-to-week basis?
Of course. So personally, I really believe that product is a role where you have to create influence, right? None of the engineers are really reporting to you. And this is specifically true when you are interacting with the engineers. So as far as my interaction with engineers, what I do, my philosophy is advocating for their needs, along with making sure that they understand the business goals, the business vision, and they understand why they're building what they're building. Specifically in this company, I have been able to work and come up with a collaborative relationship with each of the engineers and make sure to bring them from the very early on in the discovery process. This has been really helpful in this team. Prior to me joining, I had noticed when I first joined that there was some morale shift in our engineers due to them not knowing what they're working on. So bringing them along in the journey of discovery has been quite helpful, not just for the engineers' morale, but also for our product. Specifically, our product is very technically complex. So when you bring them in the discovery process, there are times where they're able to identify needs and solutions that I wouldn't even have thought about just because they're in the technical space more, they're diving in the product. So as I mentioned, my relationship with the engineers are very collaborative. I do tend to act as their advocate in the company. I make sure I am interacting with them on a day-to-day to understand, estimation around our product and how long it will take to go out before promising a feature deadline to our customer. Anything specifically you're interested in this question that you want me to
Yeah.
dive into?
Yeah, Neha, I'd love to hear your mindset around as a product owner, product manager, how do you prioritize and how do you explain the why of the work to the team?
Yeah, so prioritization really starts from the business goal, right? So I know there's a lot of prioritization frameworks out there, Moscow, RISE. I've used all of them in the past, but truly when it comes to application, what I really look at is what are we trying to achieve as a company? So when you look at Tree, for example, the company that I work at, we really want to improve and bring on new ARR in the company. So we want to identify essentially what percentage of market space can we own in the next 1 month, 2 month, 2 years, 3 years, right? And then from there on, I start by going out there, meeting customers, meeting users, looking at our feature backlog to see what from that list of ideas can we start picking up that directly aligns with the end goal, right? So that's one step of prioritization. Is essentially figuring out, what is the company goal, and then what are some of the solutions that could meet that goal. And then, so that's more on the feature level, right? When you break it down further in the product team level and a product owner level, what you really want to look at is using prioritization techniques. So Moscow is a really good one that I always start with. I get all the stakeholder in a room together and I ask, out of this feature that we have identified that will solve the initial company problem, which one do you think is a must-have for your customer? Which one do you think is a nice to have? Which one do you think we can potentially knock out because we can wait on delivering that feature, right? Until maybe the end of the quarter. So RISE is a framework that we use quite frequently at our company. It really depends on how this framework specifically depends on how much you know about your customers and if you're able to put a number behind the confidence level as well, right? So in my specific scenario, we know our customers pretty well. We know how much of a market share we own. So anytime we pick a feature, we're able to decide, all right, what percentage of market share is this specific feature targeting? If it's close to 60%, 100%, we usually almost always prioritize that feature, right? So this prioritization question that you asked, Vivek, it really depends on the situation, the company that you're working in, the customer group that you're working with, and the specific problem statement that you're trying to go after.
Awesome. Thank you, Neha. You actually started by saying that you have one of your strengths is working with stakeholders. I would love to hear outside of Tree as well. You can maybe bring in some examples on how you've created that relationship with stakeholders and how you've collaborated with them in the initial requirement gathering process.
Sounds good. Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think interaction with stakeholder, and you'll find that with all my answers, it really depends on which stakeholder you're interacting with, right? CEO has a different result that they are wanting to focus on. Operations is different. As a product manager, you really interact with everyone. I think the most crucial aspect that I pay attention to is what each stakeholder needs are, and cater my solution based on that need, right? So as an example, I recently worked on improving a customer interaction in our product. Everyone had very strong opinions on how the interaction should look, and rightly so, because each of our stakeholders, they had to deal with these customers daily. So if something went wrong, they have to go out there and they have to answer them, right? So we all know customer service is not super fun. So it makes sense why they're coming at you with strong opinions, because they deal with this every single day. So ultimately, the way I interact with these stakeholders who have strong opinions is always relying on data through user research, data through interviewing some of our users who actually are facing these problems. I actually, in this company, even sent out various pictures of our interactions that we're going to be deploying, and gathered confidence level from our customers on which interactions they like more and which interactions will actually, solve the problem we're trying to go after. So sometimes data could truly just be an opinion, like a Slack message. If it's enough people and you're starting to see a pattern, you can kind of like start diving deeper from there. But your goal should be to essentially get a mix of qualitative and quantitative data and research to influence our customers and our stakeholders. So when it comes to interacting with stakeholders, I usually rely on empathy and then data to make sure I'm influencing their decisions and guiding them towards what the real problem is. As far as requirement gathering, again, it depends. Requirement gathering with engineers look very different from requirement gathering, with our stakeholders. Since we're talking about external stakeholders in this case, again, I go back to methods like Moscow, where I just sit down and I'm like, you know what? This is the whole scope of the product. It's going to take us 6 months to deliver. And I know you want this feature in 3 months only. This is our capacity. We only have 2 backend engineer, 2 front-end engineer, maybe 1 full stack engineer. What do you guys really need from this? Let's start coming up with a solution together so our customers could have something in their hand way faster. Right? So at this point, you're making them realize that, hey, we're both in here to win. We're both trying to figure out a solution together. We both want to solve the same problem. It's not necessarily my priorities versus your priorities. We're working towards the same goal of delivering a product that our users love. And then from there on, it's a different conversation. It's a different kind of like interaction when you're in that room with that mindset. So I think framing the conversation also helps a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Neha. Vivek, I'll go ahead and take the next one if you don't mind. So Neha, I was wondering, you just spoke a lot about engineering, the engineers and creating a product that you love, which I love. I was wondering, how do you do estimation for your product backlog items with your engineering team?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think my answer will differ a little bit from a lot of other product owners and managers. I believe that our engineers, the engineers that I work with, should essentially have as much say in estimating as possible, right? So I've seen a lot of product managers, and I have definitely been guilty of doing this in the past, where I'll go to stakeholders and I'll give an estimation based on what I think is possible. Personally, I've set my Scrum team up in a way where our engineers, they already know what we're working on. They write their own tickets in Jira and they estimate, right? So estimating for me is a collaborative effort. Estimating for me is figuring out what the stakeholder wants in a given time frame and then working backward. But more importantly, estimating, and especially the product backlog, is having the tickets ready, having the tickets grouped, having the requirements ready for the tickets so engineers know exactly what to expect and what to deliver. And then as far as the real estimating part, to be very honest, because I'm not coding, I have no say in it. They story point it themselves to let me know how long it will take. And from there, if I find that it's taking longer than what my stakeholders will allow, then negotiation starts. But yeah, that's my general approach to estimating. Do you want to know anything specific around that?
No, I think you answered that question. My next question is, what do you do if, you just said that you would talk about negotiations. If your team comes up with a number, comes up with an estimation, and it just takes longer than expected, because things come up, things happen. So what do you do in those situations? How do you facilitate those conversations with your team and with stakeholders?
Yeah. That's a really good question, actually. And it's definitely a scenario that we face a lot, and I'm facing one right now where the feature we have estimated as an overall feature, not just 1 or 2 like tickets, is taking us a whole quarter to deliver, and we only have 3 weeks to allocate towards this feature, because ultimately this feature is not bringing us new money, new revenue, so we're not putting a lot of engineering capacity towards it. So it depends on the feature, but in this case, if we take my company's example, what I am doing and what my strategy is I'm handing the feature to the engineering team to descope. So that's fine if you're saying that this specific feature is, going to take a quarter, but because we have 3 sprints only to complete this as per leadership priorities, what can we descope? Usually when you hand that to engineering team, you'll find that they're usually going with an option that is less risky. And because of that, it takes longer to build. So one of them is engineering descoping, right? And this is a specific example in this scenario at my company. Things that I've also done in the past is usually when tickets are high estimates, there is room for breaking down the ticket further, right? So you guys have heard of invest criteria, making sure that each ticket that you get is independent, right? I'm not going to go in all the acronyms, but that is usually a good sign if all the tickets that you're getting is really long, to break down the tickets further into a smaller scope to make sure it's meeting the invest criteria, and that each ticket is testable and each ticket is releasable, and each ticket that you're creating is small enough while it's still creating value to your users, right? So sometimes descoping is not just engineering and technical descoping, it's design descoping, it's requirement descoping. Maybe we're going after something that is, that should be like 2 months from now, but we're committing to delivering that 2 weeks from now, right? So it really depends on, the context of the situation, but these are some of the methods I've employed in the past to negotiate with the engineers.
That's awesome. Thank you, Neha. I have a question that I would like to just know your thoughts on. I'd love to understand what specific product metrics are you tracking on a week-to-week basis versus month-to-month versus quarterly? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So again, it depends on the company and the product that you're in. What I'm tracking currently is on a week-to-week basis, our daily active user, how many users are actually going into the platform. We call that DAU in the product world. Out of those users, how many users, out of those like daily active users, how many are coming back, how many are actually finishing the booking process, booking conversion rate. So I'm tracking that quite frequently. I'm also tracking any weird app behaviors, right? So if for a specific customer, they're never interacting with the button or a feature, but all of a sudden you see spikes in that, I want to know why that's happening. So on a week-to-week basis, I make sure I have a good grasp of what the users are doing in the platform, and if they are actually completing the CTAs that I want them to complete or not. By CTA, I mean call to action. So if you break that down on a day-to-day basis, or sorry, on a month-to-month basis, that's where I'm in my Pendo guidelines. That's the analytics platform that we use, not only to track the conversion rate that I mentioned already, and looking at it from a longer month perspective, but I'm also looking at our funnel to see where are we getting new users from. This is where I bring in sales as well and ask questions around how are new customers perceiving our feature. Where are they hearing about us? What have you guys heard in the past couple weeks in your sales call that is sticking out to you, that may not be the most beneficial towards our product? Or what are you just loving? Specifically in the space that I am in, it's a very competitive space. There's a lot of other companies that are competing for the same market share. So I'm also looking to see, how our product is doing in comparison to those competitors. So definitely tracking some of those metrics as well related to that. And then lastly, I personally also do pay attention to Net Promoter Score. So that is basically on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. How likely are you to tell other customers about our product, other users about our product? And specifically the way our Pendo guide is set up, they actually go in, they enter their input. It's a free text on if they like the product, if so, why, if they don't, why not? And then, I use that data to dive deeper into a problem space, if it is a problem space at all. And then on a yearly basis and quarterly and yearly basis, I'm really looking at the bigger KPIs and the OKRs that company has set to see if we're achieving those or not. So if the company, OKR is migrate all of our customer from old platform to new platform, I'm tracking data around that to make sure, 100% of those customers who are on the old request or the legacy flow have actually transferred to the new flow. So that's when I kind of like do like a big universal dive into, are we meeting all those OKRs? and are the KPIs supporting those OKRs as well? And those could be things like annual recurring revenue, annual contract value. It really is dependent on what the CEO of the company is focused on.
Yeah, I have a question for you. I've seen on your resume that you've worked with mainly just team roles right from when you started as a data analyst, and you did a few other roles as well. I'm curious, how do you approach conflict? Like, if you can walk us through a time where you were in a conflict and how did you mediate or resolve that?
So a conflict that I recently actually faced is when you're working as a product manager, you're interacting with a lot of different stakeholders, right? Each of the stakeholders that you interact with, they have their own priorities that they're working towards. So for example, design, they want to make sure that their design is getting implemented. But that might not align with product priorities because we just want to make sure we're getting, let's say, more money, right, as a company. So even though the design is super innovative and it looks great, it might not align with product. Engineering, on the other hand, they're obviously focused on developing these new features, but they also have to focus on tech debt. They have to focus on bugs. They have their own priorities. So in product, you're really dealing with a scenario where you're fighting with these competing priorities to fulfill the company's end goal, right? So in this current situation, one of my engineers and one of my designers had a dispute where the engineer that she was working with was not very perceptive to her innovative designs, because a lot of the components in the design weren't built. They're not in our file. Designer, on the other hand, she had the mindset of, we should take risk and we should spend more time building these solutions because we as a company, could use better enhancements to our user experience, right? And it makes sense. They were both in the right spaces. If we bring in new innovative design and have engineers build it, then our scope is gonna essentially 2x, 3x, 10x sometimes, because we have to build new components in the front end file. But at the same time, if design starts listening to engineering, then we're never gonna get an innovative space. And this is something that I deal with quite often in the product world, more than I would like to. So how I deal with these situations is ultimately I, listen to them. I validate both of their experiences. It's important to do that specifically for morale purpose, because as a product leader, a lot of people are also looking at you for answers because you know some of the business answers that they might not. And then at the end, the two things that I always rely on is customer data. I know I've said data a lot, but data usually does solve these problems. If you actually put the new design in front of customers and you're able to get good feedback on it and, it ends up working out, then that's a good sign that you should probably invest in that, right? So data is definitely one of them. The second one is business goal. So another thing that we as a team look at when things like this happen is, what are we trying to achieve in a whole year, right? And what will happen if we bring in these new innovative designs in this quarter? If it pushes timeline by, let's say, 2-3 months, that's a lot, and that's something that we just can't afford, right? So when you bring that idea to the engineer and you let them know, or the designer, that, hey, even though the solution is really innovative, ultimately it's not really adding any value from a money perspective, or it's not adding any value to customers right away. We haven't even been able to prove that it's adding any value. So why don't we release the most minimal version of that design, test it out with users, test the water a little bit, and see if they're gonna like it or not. If they like it, then yes, I'm happy to implement that solution more and go with the grand vision that you as a designer have. So in that, in scenarios like that, you have to act very intelligently. Like, you have to use your emotional intelligence technique, because you don't want to offend anyone necessarily. And people will be offended, but at the same time, you want to navigate the situation in a way where you're kind of taking the blame away from yourself and the company, and you're putting it on in some way, like data and the overall goal that you're trying to all go towards. So yeah, even though this design is going to take a long time for us to build, or is really innovative, at the end of the day, it's not really offering any value towards the main OKR that we're trying to go after. So let's come up with a minimal viable solution, put it out on the market, test it, and if it does well, maybe we can come back to the solution and try to find a better idea that we can implement. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. One question that I had for you, Neha. In this last role or any roles, have you ever worked with a Scrum Master? And if you have worked with a Scrum Master, how do you create alignment with them so that you can serve the team?
Yeah, I've definitely worked with Scrum Masters in the past. With Scrum Masters, as a product manager, my duty is to make sure that the backlog is prioritized according to the business goals. And the way I work with Scrum Master is to make sure that they know exactly what needs to go into each sprint prior to sprint planning, and that they have explanation and the why behind why everything in the backlog is in the order that it is. And obviously that's before sprint planning. As far as backlog prioritization and some of the other organization in Jira, I've worked with Scrum Master in that capacity where I make sure they do attend meetings with me around business goals so they have a good understanding of what we're working on, and they're not super dependent on me to do some of that work themselves in mediating and facilitating and conflict management. That they have an understanding of where we're going. So when an engineer or when an external team member asks them question around what we're working on, they have the right answers. So again, I make sure that they're equipped for success.
Yeah, thank you, Neha. That's actually good. Thanks for the mindset. I'm curious, Neha. In your first round, we were really impressed that you started as a pre-med student and you started with a data role and you went into product and you're already a senior product manager. So really impressed by your growth. I'm just curious, what's different now as a senior product manager? What areas have you had to grow, starting out as a data analyst, a junior product manager, to now a senior product manager leading a large tech team?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think all these roles have been very different. Data analytics, you're really working behind the scenes to collect user data, which has served me really well as a product manager, to really understand where the data is coming from, and how to analyze those data towards coming up with a solution. I mean, data, as I mentioned in this interview, is the backbone of everything that I do. But as far as some of the newer skills that I've had to learn as I'm transitioning into senior product manager is more around people management. Public speaking is huge. I think as a product manager, people don't give enough credit or don't talk enough about how important it is to give presentation in a way that's effective to each of your stakeholders. There's so many times where, I have proper documentation, but none of them go and read it, right? It's just true. Like your CEO is not going to go read your product, your PRD, right? Your sales team is not really going to go in and kind of like ask internal team member what's going on. They just kind of have to be aligned on what we're working on as a team. So it's up to you as a product manager to meet with each of these stakeholders, manage them effectively, and present what you're working on to them in a way where they're motivated, where they're inspired, and they're looking forward to just being at this company. Truly, I mean, product does touch exactly what is being worked on. Especially in a software company, it's like the middle ground of everything. So I think presentation and effective presentation has been huge. Along the same line, emotional intelligence is something that I've had to not learn, but employ a lot more. When things go wrong in a product company and you're the senior product manager, everyone comes to you. And that's not just releases going wrong, but it's also conflicts, as we talked about in the previous questions. People usually look up to you for answers, and you need to be able to navigate that, which I haven't had to do that much in the past because I go to my boss for answers. But in this company, as a product leader, I truly am the one that people come to when they have questions about anything on the roadmap, anything that they're working on. Yeah, I would say those two things are probably the biggest thing. And the last thing that I would say is more logistical and strategic. More logistical is understanding the strategy. So in the past roles, I've never had to have a good understanding of our competitive landscape, how much of a market share we hold, how we make money, our balance sheet and all of that stuff. But in this role as a product manager in a startup, you really have to understand the ins and out of the business. You have to know where you're making your money from. You have to know what is next for us as a company, as a startup, so we can stay competitive in the market. You have to know who are the new guys in the market that could potentially disrupt us. So it's truly, I think, a lifestyle once you become a senior product manager where you have to be on top of it, or you guys know the current economic state, you guys know the current competitive state. It's really easy for us to, go under if we're not keeping on top of it. And it's a collaborative effort, it's an effort between me, the CEO, the COO, the operations people, to kind of give me that information, and then I dive deeper into it. But yeah, very important to kind of like be on top of some of that.
Thank you, Neha. Neha, we have one last question. I have one last question. So this is a fun question. Don't take it too seriously. And this is we want to see your creativity on this one. So as a product manager, we wanted to know like in your personal life, how do you apply product management? Like what's your product, what's your strategy, what's your roadmap, what's your vision, what kind of KPIs that you're tracking? So fire away.
That's a really fun question. I've never been asked that. I definitely, have a roadmap for life, which is really funny because it goes against some of my views of just, living life as it comes towards you. And that applies to product too. I can give you examples, where we've had to change our roadmap because something in the market changed. Right. So similarly in my life, there are things I want to do this week that I have plans for. There's things that I want to do this month. There's things I want to do in a year. And I have found a way to put it on the roadmap and essentially break down those big goals into small tasks. In the product world, those tasks translate into tickets, right? So you have features that you want to build, and then you break it down into smaller tickets, right? And then on top of everything is vision. It's like, where do I want to be 5 years from now? Like, do I want to be in Denver still, or do I want to be in another country, right? And there is like small steps you have to take every single day to move toward that end goal. So I definitely, think that has been the biggest lifestyle implications that I've applied from product world to real life. In general, this is going to sound super nerdy. I feel like I keep saying data. But it is true, even in my personal life, I track, and prioritize things according to, what's important. So tying it back to the roadmap, in product, you have to prioritize feature XYZ is going to take me to this specific goal. On a Sunday, for example, when I'm doing chores, I'm like, chores XYZ is going to prepare me for a better week. So it's kind of the same scenario. People complicate product a lot, but it's not complicated when you start, living that product, and when you really understand what the problem is and start going after that problem. Similar to the life situation where if you know where you want to go, it's really easy to break it down into smaller chunks. It's just the working backwards piece.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Neha. We've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more. And I guess our team will reach out to you with any other questions or anything that we might need from you. But thank you so much for coming out today.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure meeting all of you guys, and I look forward to the next steps.
All right, that's a wrap with this episode. Thank you for listening till the end. We hope these podcasts are providing value on your Agile journey. If you haven't visited our website, theagilecoach.com, we highly suggest you for other courses and supporting material on your journey. You can also get access to our self-paced courses or learn more about the live training that we provide to become a Scrum Master, product owner, product manager. With that, we will see you on the next episode. Love and best wishes from the Agile Coach.